When a man at the gym tried to intimidate a quiet black woman, he had no idea she was a highly trained Navy SEAL. What happened next stunned everyone in the room and left him humiliated. You won't believe how this powerful story unfolds. The Midtown Fitness Center buzzed with its usual after-work chaos. Rows of treadmills hummed in unison, weights clanked rhythmically, and pop music thumped faintly overhead. Amid the sea of gym-goers was Kendra, a 34-year-old black woman who moved with quiet confidence. Dressed in simple black leggings and a tank top, she adjusted the weights on a barbell with precise, efficient movements. Her earbuds were firmly in, a clear signal she wasn't there for small talk. Her routine was disciplined, almost military in its rhythm: deadlifts, burpees, pull-ups. She worked swiftly and with purpose, drawing little attention, except for those who admired her focus. A faint scar ran along her forearm, a detail she never explained, but one that occasionally drew curious glances. Across the room he appeared, mid-40s, broad-shouldered, and exuding a cocky self-assurance. The man's eyes locked on Kendra as he sauntered closer, his expression a blend of curiosity and arrogance. As she adjusted the barbell on the squat rack, his voice broke through her concentration. "Hey," he said, his tone casual but tinged with condescension. "You're setting that up wrong. You could hurt yourself." Kendra paused, slowly removing one earbud. Her calm gaze met his. "I'm good, thanks," she replied evenly. But he didn't move. Instead, he folded his arms, his stance wide, as if staking claim to the space. "I've been coming here for years," he added with a smirk. "Let me show you how it's done." "I appreciate the concern, but I've got it," Kendra said firmly, replacing the earbud and returning to her set. The man's smirk faded into a scowl. Muttering something under his breath, he stepped back, but only slightly. His presence lingered like a storm cloud, his irritation palpable. A couple of gym-goers glanced over, sensing the tension but staying out of it. The gym wasn't just loud with noise, it buzzed with unspoken energy, a mix of unease and curiosity. As Kendra began her set, her movements fluid and precise, one question hung in the air: why did this man feel so threatened by her? The clang of metal weights and rhythmic thud of sneakers against treadmills filled the air as Kendra moved to the bench press, her every movement precise and deliberate. She adjusted the barbell, aligning it perfectly with the practiced hand of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Her demeanor remained calm, but she was acutely aware of the man still lingering nearby. He approached again, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over her space. "Still not getting it?" "Ha," he quipped, his voice louder this time, dripping with a mix of condescension and mock concern. "You'll hurt yourself if you keep doing it like that." Kendra paused, her hands still on the barbell, and looked up at him. Slowly she removed one earbud, her gaze steady and unreadable. "I appreciate the advice," she said evenly, "but I've got it handled." The man's smirk twisted into something more hostile. "Handled? Sure doesn't look like it. Why don't you let someone with experience show you how it's done?" "I'm good," she replied, returning her focus to the barbell. But he didn't leave. Instead, he planted himself just a few feet away, arms crossed, his presence intrusive and suffocating. He muttered something under his breath, a jab meant to provoke, but Kendra ignored it, maintaining her focus on her workout. A couple of gym-goers noticed the interaction now, their glances curious but hesitant to intervene. Kendra moved to another station, transitioning to pull-ups with the same fluid efficiency. Her grip was unorthodox, her movements precise, and it caught the eye of a young man nearby. He paused his workout, his brows furrowing as he observed her technique, different, calculated, almost tactical. The man, still watching her like a predator sizing up its prey, followed. "Women like you always think you know better," he said, his voice loud enough for nearby patrons to hear. Kendra dropped from the pull-up bar and turned to face him, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "Excuse me." "I said," he continued, his tone mocking, "maybe you should stick to what you're good at. Lifting weights clearly isn't it." The air in the gym shifted. Conversations quieted, and the clatter of weights seemed to dull as heads turned toward the confrontation. A tension settled over the room, thick and oppressive. Kendra held his gaze, her posture unwavering. "I'm not sure what you're trying to prove here," she said, her voice measured. "But I'm not interested." Her calm demeanor only seemed to enrage him further. He stepped closer, his voice dropping into something colder, more dangerous. "You think you're better than me? What makes you so special, huh?" The young man who had noticed her earlier reached for his phone, sensing something unusual in her composure and her movements. He began recording discreetly, drawn by the quiet strength she exuded against the growing hostility of the man before her. Kendra stood her ground, her voice unshaken. "Special? No. But I know how to handle myself. That's more than I can say for you." The man's face darkened, his frustration boiling over. "You better watch your mouth," he spat, stepping into her personal space. Gasps rippled through the gym as he crossed an unspoken line, his voice rising with an inflammatory comment that echoed across the room. "That's the problem with people like you, thinking you can just walk in here and act like you own the place." The room fell silent. Conversation stopped entirely, and every pair of eyes locked onto the confrontation. The man's words hung in the air, sour and stinging, as Kendra straightened to her full height. Her composure didn't falter. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, and the faintest flicker of something dangerous crossed her face, a warning that was both subtle and unmistakable. The tension in the gym had grown impossible to ignore. Conversations dwindled, and the hum of the usual chaos seemed to falter, giving way to a palpable unease. Kendra stood at the dumbbell rack, switching to a set of shoulder presses. Her movements remained steady and purposeful, but she could feel the man's eyes on her, his presence looming like a storm cloud. He was emboldened now, the earlier exchange only feeding his arrogance. He took a step closer, loud enough for nearby gym goers to hear, and said, "Still think you don't need help? You look like you're about to drop those weights any second." Kendra lowered the dumbbells with deliberate control, placing them neatly on the rack. She turned to face him, her expression calm but her voice cutting. "If I needed your help, I would have asked. But I didn't." The man's smirk faltered for a split second before he crossed his arms, his posture tightening with irritation. "You've got a real attitude problem, you know that." By now, a small crowd had begun to form. A couple on the treadmill slowed their pace, their gazes darting toward the confrontation. A young woman by the elliptical paused mid-step, her phone discreetly tilted to capture the scene. Whispers rippled through the gym, a mix of concern and intrigue. Kendra exhaled slowly, refusing to match his hostility. "I came here to work out, not entertain you," she said, her tone measured but unyielding. "If you're looking for attention, you won't find it here." The man stepped closer, deliberately invading her space. His voice dropped, low and dripping with menace. "You don't talk to me like that." Kendra didn't flinch. Instead, she met his glare head-on, her composure unwavering. "You don't want to do this," she said, her voice calm but firm. The subtle edge in her words was enough to make those watching hold their breath. The crowd sensed the shift. Phones were raised, cameras now rolling openly as the gym patrons waited to see what would unfold. A murmur ran through the bystanders, some debating whether to step in, others frozen in the awkward tension of the moment. The man leaned in closer, his face inches from hers now. "What are you going to do about it?" he taunted, his tone louder, meant to provoke. Kendra's gaze remained steady, her jaw tightening just slightly. Her voice, however, remained controlled, as if she were speaking to a wayward child. "I suggest you step back," she said evenly, "before you regret it." The crowd watched, captivated by the quiet power in her demeanor. It wasn't defiance, it was control, the kind that spoke of experience and discipline. A young man near the free weights whispered to his friend, "She's not even scared. Look at her." But the antagonist wasn't backing down. His frustration boiled over, his voice rising to fill the room. "Regret? You think I'm afraid of you?" he shouted, gesturing wildly. "You don't belong here, acting like you own the place." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. His words were sharp, cutting through the atmosphere like a knife, and the air seemed to grow heavier with the weight of his aggression. Kendra tilted her head slightly, her expression betraying nothing but quiet resolve. "This isn't about belonging," she said, her tone steady. "It's about knowing when to stop. And you don't." Her words struck a nerve. The man's face darkened, his fists clenching at his sides. He took another step forward, closing the gap entirely, his chest puffed out in an attempt to intimidate. But Kendra didn't back down. Instead, she straightened to her full height, her posture as solid as a statue. "Last warning," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Step away." The crowd, now fully invested, buzzed with anticipation. The gym employees behind the counter exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene. The young woman recording whispered to her friend, "She's too calm. Something's about to happen." And then, the man crossed the final line. He reached out, his hand aiming to grab her shoulder, a move meant to assert dominance. But before he could make contact, Kendra's hand shot up, intercepting his wrist with a grip so firm it stopped him mid-motion. The room collectively held its breath as she stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying a weight that sent shivers down the spines of those watching. "I warned you," she said. The man froze, his bravado crumbling as he realized, too late, that he had underestimated her. The gym was silent now, save for the faint sound of a phone notification pinging in the background. Every eye was on them, every camera capturing the moment. The gym was electric with tension, the air heavy as the confrontation reached its boiling point. The man's face was flushed with frustration, his jaw tight and his fist clenched at his sides. The crowd was silent now, their focus riveted on the two figures at the center of the storm. "You think you're tough," the man growled, stepping closer to Kendra, his tone dripping with venom. "You don't belong here. You don't know your place." Kendra stood her ground, her expression calm but her gaze unwavering. She took a slow, measured breath. "This is your last chance," she said, her voice low but firm, carrying a weight that seemed to echo across the room. "Walk away." The man laughed, a harsh, humorless sound as he lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. "Or what?" he spat. "What are you going to do about it?" What happened next unfolded so quickly that the man, and everyone watching, barely had time to react. Kendra's body moved like a coiled spring releasing its tension. In one fluid motion, she twisted her arm free, pivoting with precision to trap his wrist in an ironclad grip. The man's eyes widened, his expression shifting from anger to shock as she applied just enough pressure to make him wince. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Kendra stepped forward, using her momentum to unbalance him. Her movements were deliberate and controlled, her focus razor-sharp. Before the man could recover, she executed a seamless sweep of his legs, sending him crashing to the mat with a thud that reverberated through the gym. The crowd erupted into murmurs, a mixture of shock and awe, as the man lay sprawled on the ground, clutching his arm and groaning. Kendra stepped back, her stance steady and unshaken, her breathing even. She glanced around the room, her eyes scanning the onlookers with a calm intensity that silenced their whispers. "Let me make this clear," she said, her voice carrying over the stunned silence. "You don't put your hands on me or anyone else. Ever." The man scrambled to his feet, his bravado now replaced with humiliation. He opened his mouth to retort, but the words didn't come. Instead, he stared at her, his anger melting into something resembling fear. From the corner of the gym, a young man in a hoodie stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Wait a second," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's not just self-defense. That was Navy SEAL technique, wasn't it?" The crowd turned to Kendra, their eyes wide with curiosity and newfound respect. Kendra's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She met the young man's gaze and answered with a single, impactful line, "Yes, Navy SEAL." The room erupted into a flurry of reactions. Whispers turned into exclamations as people pieced together the significance of what they had just witnessed. Some clapped, others nodded in admiration, and a few muttered, "No wonder she's so calm." The man, still rubbing his wrist, stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by visible shame and disbelief. "Navy SEAL," he muttered, shaking his head. "You've got to be kidding me." Kendra didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. She turned away from him, her composure intact, and addressed the crowd. "It's over," she said simply, her tone as steady as her resolve. As the gym staff approached the man to escort him out, he hesitated for a moment, glancing at Kendra one last time. but the look in her eyes stopped him cold. There was nothing left to say. Shoulders slumping, he grabbed his bag and stormed toward the exit, the glass doors rattling behind him. The crowd began to disperse, but the energy lingered in the room, an unspoken acknowledgement of the power and discipline they had just witnessed. A gym employee approached Kendra, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Kendra nodded. "I'm fine. Thank you." The young man with the hoodie stepped closer, still recording. "That was incredible," he said. You owned him. People need to see this." Kendra gave him a small smile, her eyes serious but kind. "Sometimes standing your ground is all it takes," she said. Then, with a nod to the staff, she walked toward the locker room, leaving the crowd to process what they had witnessed. As she disappeared from view, the buzz in the gym continued to grow. People exchanged stories, replayed videos, and marveled at how effortlessly she had handled the situation. But for Kendra, it wasn't about the attention. It was about the principle: respect isn't optional, and underestimating someone can have consequences far beyond what you expect. The gym's buzzing energy slowly settled as the staff approached the scene, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. A young employee stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Sir, you need to leave," she said firmly, addressing the antagonist. The man glanced around, his eyes darting between the staff and the onlookers, who watched him with disdain and disbelief. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, grabbing his bag with shaking hands. His once overconfident demeanor had crumbled into humiliation. He avoided Kendra's gaze entirely, the reality of his actions weighing heavily on him as he slinked toward the exit. As the glass doors swung shut behind him, the gym exhaled collectively. Whispers and conversations filled the air, but Kendra remained composed. She calmly retrieved her belongings, her movements measured and unhurried. "Are you sure you're okay?" asked Tara, the young employee who had taken charge. Her voice carried genuine concern. Kendra nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm fine. Thank you for stepping in." Nearby, a gym-goer whispered to their friend, "I can't believe she handled it so calmly. She's incredible." By the time Kendra reached the locker room, the energy had shifted. People were no longer just stunned, they were inspired. Tara followed her inside, her nervousness replaced by admiration. "That was unbelievable," she said. "You didn't just stand up to him. You showed everyone what strength looks like." Kendra turned, her expression kind but serious. "It's not just about strength. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone take that from you." Tara hesitated, then blurted out, "I'm signing up for self-defense classes. I don't ever want to feel helpless if something like that happens." A smile tugged at Kendra's lips. "That's a good idea," she said. "It's not just about protecting yourself. It's about confidence, knowing you can handle whatever comes your way." Later that evening, Kendra sat on her couch, her dog curled at her feet. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Clips of the incident were already going viral. Comments flooded in "This is what real strength looks like," and "Never judge someone by appearances." As she watched the footage, Kendra reflected on the day's events. The incident had been more than a confrontation, it was a lesson for everyone in the room, and now, for those watching online, respect isn't optional, and resilience is a quiet but unshakable force. Looking directly into the camera for a brief follow-up interview, she delivered her final thought: standing your ground isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about knowing your own value and reminding others to respect it. We all have the power to stand tall, let's use it.